Guys, wanted to do a little video on nested loops. I'd seen a video a few days ago about a developer, you know, uh, just basically complaining about nested loops, and I forget what language he was referring to. It was a specific language. I forget if it was Python or Java.net. I'm not even sure. But that's like the most common thing I see in VBA. And I'm not giving advice to anybody here, but just preference. Um, if anything, I actually kind of prefer people do it this way because usually mismanagement of code is why I end up getting contracts. So for those of you who don't know, what a nested, it could be called a nested if or a nested for, but it's basically like a nested block. Anything where you're iterating on some kind of value or variable, and you're then iterating again within that same block. So like, I'll do a test here. I'll create a public test. And, let's say, right, you have long row as a long, column as a long, and then, you start doing something like this, row 1 to 100, and then you start to nest inside. Column 1 to 100. Then, I've seen code where, this is not only nested, sometimes up to 8 levels deep, and then you've got, test people are then doing their testing of variables and conditions in here. And then, this is clean because we can see it all within, a snippet of, a couple of lines, 6, 7 lines. But imagine if this was pages upon pages long. It's completely ugly. It's unmanageable. It's not easier for not only yourself to go back to and comprehend, but for other people that maybe take over your project. And again, like I said, I'm not really complaining about this because mismanagement of building these products, these applications, because they're usually homegrown by the business. I'll typically have clients that, try to go to IT originally to get, stuff built for their business needs, and IT will either drag their feet or, not take them seriously. And so the business just comes out and hires someone like me to, either enhance their application or, build it from scratch. In this particular example, right, with the enhancements, because the person in the business that had a little taste of software development and a little taste of VBA, maybe uses the record macro feature a lot, they'll start to piece together something that works up until the point it doesn't. But when I typically will inherit a project that's not even when it's done by a software developer, I see spaghetti code and nested blocks like this. But yeah, it's not a complaint. I totally, I think it helps me get a lot of work. So anyway, right, when you start nesting like this, it does become unmanageable because, right, it can just get very long. So correct way to do this, in my opinion, is where you would, instead of nest, branch off. So instead of nesting at this point, create another subroutine. We'll just say like here, call calls. And then if we needed any variables from that prior sub, we could pass them in. If we needed that row, we could pass that in, and then, we can just start iterating here. So we're going, 100 rows by 100 columns. And let's say, right, we need to do like an if test here. Instead of doing that, do the same thing. And I'm making these private subs just because, assuming that, right, they're not being called outside of this routine. There's no other modules anyway or classes. So it's unlikely they'd be called outside of the routine. Obviously, you can call them from within the sheet and workbook objects, so that is possible. Let's say we'll call this like test ifs, and then if we had a test, let's say, right, if row is not equal to the column, then do something. And then I tend to always, let's say we wanted to write like L row, L col, value equals L row plus L col. And we have to invoke variables here. And I always tend to leave the calling function blank and then fill it in later. I sometimes do forget to, to put it in, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll just set a bookmark to remind myself. And then here we could say, pass those in. And I would also have to do that here. So we'll call calls, and then we want to pass in a row. We obviously don't need this variable anymore. So just a little note on the readability, the manageability of code and nested blocks. Just something to keep in mind when you're building, and this obviously extends beyond VBA. It's applicable to all languages out there.